spiritual service that it is when you pray. And friends, another reminder, if you serve God and express the ministry of the gospel through prayer, you are having a vital part of gospel ministry. I've heard story after story of retired individuals who can't get out of the house maybe, or stuck, and they become prayer warriors. Friends, the reward in heaven is not dimmed any less for them. It's brighter. Prayer is what we need, and we need to pray for one another. Paul expresses the ministry with incessant prayer for these believers. But he had a specific request, and this is his earnest desire that he shows in the prayer, but then he also communicates to them as well. His request, one of his chief requests in prayers, verse 10, is making request, if by any means, now at length, which is another way of saying now finally, I might have a prosperous journey, I might succeed by the will of God to come to you. Did you catch what Paul's earnest desire is here? What a tremendous thing. Paul's earnest desire, he says, I want to come see you. Now, when Paul wrote the book of Corinthians, he wanted to come see them. They didn't want to have him come see them because they were full of things that were wrong and they knew it. And Paul uses this words, I'm going to come see you, in a different context in Corinthians. He says, if you don't straighten up, I'm going to come see you. But here, this is a mutual joy. I've heard so much about you, Roman Christians. Your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. I want to come see you. I want to come be a part of you. I want to be encouraged by you. And yes, he says that later on here. Paul uses this strong language as he intercedes for their ministry, for their church, to say he loves them. And I've never met you, but we have a fellowship. There is a bond, and I just got to see you. I got to come see you. He invokes the testimony of God. He uses strong verbiage, making request by any means. Now finally, by the will of God, long to see you. And he expresses vividly an unparalleled desire to minister in some fashion to these Roman Christians. By the way, I was deeply humbled by this expression. Here is a church that Paul had never been in, people he did not know, in a ministry in the belly of the Roman dragon. And he knows that the only way he will probably ever see these Romans is in shackles. And yet he's saying, I want to come see you. In fact, we know this from the book of Acts, that Paul was given an opportunity to go to Rome in shackles or to be released. And he chose shackles. The leader, I believe it was Festus, told him, or it actually was Herod. Herod Agrippa told him, if he had not appealed to Caesar, he would have been released. But Paul appealed to Caesar. Paul wasn't dumb. He knew why he appealed to Caesar for his trial. He knew they didn't have a case against him when they were trying to try him. He knew he could have gotten off. But he intentionally appealed to go see Caesar because he thought, I get to go see Rome. We find out from the book of Romans that this is why he wanted to go to Rome. Why was he willing to get put in a ship, in a slave ship, in shackles, suffer hunger, thirst, shipwreck, pains? For I long to see you. Little rabbit trail here for just a second. Do you think this characterizes 21st century Christianity when it comes to fellowshipping with the saints in church? Just a little rabbit trail to think of for a minute there. Would we have the same earnest desire to come see one another, to fellowship, to encourage one another? I mean, shackles, hunger, imprisonment. It's greatly moved my heart when I considered Paul jumping at the opportunity to become a prisoner so he could come see these people. Paul is sold out for the gospel and for the advance in the gospel in people's lives. To the point of death, he is sold out. I was humbled by this because I live with such a life of ease in this country, in this blessed nation we live in. And I thought, do I express the same earnestness to encourage and comfort my fellow laborers in the ministry? With what earnestness do I seek to be with my church family? God gave me a gentle admonition concerning this, and I ask you to join me in praying that God will work in each one of our lives to give us the same earnest desire to be with God's people. To be with them. By the way, not just on Sunday, but to be with one another, to encourage one another. Well, this is the expression of Paul's ministry motivation. Now let's look at his ministry motivation explained. We're going to look at 2 of the 3, and then the third one we'll look at next week. On the outline I gave you, the third one is the one letter C is the one we'll look at next week. A desire for mutual edification and a sense of gospel obligation characterizes the ministry of Paul. Paul's incessant prayer and earnest desire to see them is explained so that they might be made strong, he says here. For I long to see you that I may impart unto you some spiritual gift to the end, or for this purpose, that ye may be established, that you might be built up, that you might be edified, strengthened. This might come across as arrogant, as if Paul, the aged and able, has some mysterious key of spirituality that the lowly Roman laity could learn by sitting at his feet. But if you look at the language here, that's not the intent of Paul. He explains them first of all by noting that he desired to serve in a spiritual capacity, whatever that might be. Do you notice when he says here, for I long to see you that I may impart unto you, notice the next word, some spiritual gift? If Paul was arrogantly professing that he had the key and he was going to come minister to him, don't you think he'd tell him what it was he was going to do? But the very language of Paul is humble here. He says, I want to come and I don't know what I'm going to be able to give you, but I want to give you some spiritual gift. I want to bless you. I want to encourage you. I want to do what I can to lift you up. It's not arrogance he's talking about here, as if he had nothing to receive, and later he'll even say that. He received from them. But the point is, he doesn't even know exactly how he's going to minister to them, but he's got to minister to them some way. He has this attitude that when I come to see you, my purpose is to encourage you. It's to serve you by serving God. He sought to be a spiritual blessing to them. It's not that he arrogantly supposes he has the fix to their problems, but rather that he hopes that when he arrives, he'll be able to spiritually encourage and build up the assembly. He wanted to minister to them. He wanted to bless them. He wanted to encourage them. My friends, I hope that the ministry of Grace Baptist Church is an encouragement, a blessing, a ministry to you and to the community in which we live. But I hope above that when we come to Grace, our intent is to encourage, to minister, and to bless others. You see, we live in a society which is a consumeristic approach to church and ministry. Fill me. Take care of me. In fact, I get many phone calls of people looking for churches to go to, looking for ministries to engage in, moving or from here locally. And sadly, the most common question is, well, what do you have for me in this area? What do you have for me and my kids? What do you have for me and women? What do you have for me and men? What do you have for me? How are you going to minister to me in this regard? They want to know what we can do for them. You know, that's actually backwards thinking. When we think of fellowship, we think of the body. It ought not to be, what can you do for me, but what can I do for you? How can I serve in this church? How can I minister to one another? What can I do to be a spiritual blessing and encouragement? It's not that you won't receive one. In fact, it works out beautifully that if we're all thinking of what we can do for the other, we'll receive. We've been brainwashed, by the way, in our society. We've been brainwashed to be taught that if we want, we got to take. It's affected us. Have you ever watched a commercial that doesn't tell you that you deserve or you get or you need or you must have? Is there a 2-minute time slot that goes by where that's not pounded upon us? Billboards, what? You name it, just out there. And yet the Christian life is not one of what can I get, but how can I serve God by giving? It is refreshing, and it has happened on occasions when people will call me moving from out of town, and they'll say, we're looking for a church where we can serve God and others. My heart leaps when those people call. I say, oh good, because that's what we need. He wants to meet their spiritual needs. Yes, it's important to be ministered to through an assembly, but attitude is so important. If we come seeking to impart some spiritual need, to serve, to encourage, to build up. We no doubt will be encouraged, built up, served. But he also